Good morning, everyone. My name is Paulo de Castro, and I'm the Executive Director of CCBC, the Chamber of Commerce, Brasil-Canada, based in São Paulo. Hope you are all well and safe. This is really an unusual year. In spite of the challenges we are all facing, it's interesting to realize that the trade between Canada and Brazil continues strong and stable, and even increasing in specific products and sectors. In critical times, there are always new trade opportunities, and logistics can play a strategic role in this scenario. We are very happy to be hosting this event together with BCCC, the Brasil-Canada Chamber of Commerce in Toronto, and the Port St. John, with the support of the Canadian Consulate in São Paulo, Sidera Consult, and MELLOHAWK Logistics. So now I would like to invite Albernaz for a few words.
Hi, Paulo. Thank you so much. Thank you, CCBC and Port St. John for the partnership to put this event together. I'm Albernaz, CEO of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce based in Toronto. And I would also like to make Paulo's my words and thank MELLOHAWK and Sidera Consulting for the support in organizing today. And I hope you guys all enjoy a great content and great information on opportunities in trade between Brazil and Canada and how you can use the Atlantic provinces and Port St. John to move your cargo from Brazil into Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. Carolina will be co-hosting this event together with me. Now I would like to present the Consul-General of Canada in São Paulo, Dr. Heather Cameron. Welcome, Heather.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour, bon dia. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning in this virtual webinar. And I'd like to say thank you to both Chambers of Commerce and the Port of St. John for this opportunity. Both the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce based in Toronto and the Câmara Comercial Brasil-Canada baseada in São Paulo are dedicated to strengthening our trade ties between Canada and Brazil. And this webinar is a great collaboration opportunity as we all look forward to 2021. Aujourd'hui, il y a plus de 500 compagnies canadiennes qui sont actives au Brésil dans les secteurs divers. And our trade and investment relationship is much bigger than just those 500 companies. Canadian investment in Brazil last year was over $12 billion in 2019. And the trade relationship is growing in both directions. And as a consulate, as the Trade Commissioner Service in Brazil, we have seen an increasing number of Canadian companies interested in the Brazilian market, and equally many Brazilian companies interested in Canada. Brazil is a very important investor in Canada, a very important trading partner for us. Então, para as empresas brasileiras que querem internacionalizar seus negócios, o Canadá é um destino favorito e hoje você tem a oportunidade de saber mais sobre nosso ambiente de negócios vibrante, nossos ecossistemas de logística e nossos incentivos de recursos humanos e de pesquisa e desenvolvimento. Todos são parte do Canadá e estamos orgulhoso de ver o interesse para as empresas brasileiras de investir e de fazer negócios com o Canadá. I think for a Brazilian company, it's really important to remember that we don't only offer the Canadian market, but also the North American market. And as well, free trade agreements with all other countries that are members of the G7. And we're the only G7 country, Canada, that offers those multiple free trade agreements that give you an opportunity to take business globally from Canada as your base. Então, sem dizer mais, simplesmente queria agradecer às câmaras e ao Porto de St. John para nesta oportunidade. Our Trade Commissioner Service here in Brazil is located in 6 different cities. Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Belo Horizonte, Recife, Porto Alegre, and Brasilia. So if you want to be in touch with us or through our regional offices in Canada, please do not hesitate to do so. We're here to help you make 2021 your most successful year yet. Muito obrigada. Bom dia.
Thank you, Consul-General. It's a pleasure to count with the support of the Canadian Consulate throughout the year. And I think it's quite symbolic that in our last event of the year, we are together again, helping promote the trade and more business between Brazil and Canada. Thank you very much. Now I would like to go forward and introducing our next speakers, Nikhita, Pais, and Ricardo, Rossi from Sidera Consult. Welcome, Nikhita.
Thank you, Paulo. So I'll just share the screen for the presentation. Good morning to everyone attending this webinar from different parts of the globe. I'm Nikhita Pais, an international trade and investment lawyer at Sidera Consult. Before I commence the presentation, I would take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this event, CCBC in association with BCCC and Port St. John, for giving us a platform where we could analyze what is the missing piece in the trade relations between Brazil and Canada, and what are the potential benefits for both the countries once we have the free trade agreement between Canada and the Mercosur in place. Before we proceed on to our analysis of the agreement, I would like to give you all a brief introduction to our firm. Sidera Consult is a multidisciplinary international trade and market access firm headquartered in Sao Paulo, Brazil. But we have established offices in different parts of Latin America, Israel, and South Africa. With over 350 projects to our credit, we have supported not only private corporations, but also governments and associations in various matters pertaining to trade enhancement and liberalization, and finding trade and investment opportunities and seeking to maximize those. We have consistently been awarded the #1 consultancy firm in Brazil for the past many years. We also offer strategic business promotion, unique and customized solution to all matters regarding investment attraction, removal of trade barriers, market access, and expansion. We also have over 60 experts located not only in the aforementioned countries, but also spread across the globe, who help in carrying out activities at the grassroots levels. While we offer a plethora of services, keeping to the topic of today, the trends and opportunities for Brazil and Canada in light of the free trade agreement, we would like to highlight that we offer varied services when it comes to market access and expansion, which would include providing investment and strategic advice, carrying out research and forecasting of potential opportunities for exporters and investors, as well as conducting market expansion studies. Now coming to the existing trading relations between Brazil and Canada. They have been trading partners since 1866. There has been a growing bilateral relation between these two countries in fields such as mobility, education, security, science, and innovation. According to the figures published by the Government of Canada in 2019, the merchandise trade between Brazil and Canada amounted to $7.7 billion, while the trade and services between them amounted to $1.4 billion. As mentioned earlier, and as suggested by the reports provided by the Government of Canada, the Canadian direct investment in Brazil in 2019 was over $12 billion, while Brazil's stock of direct investment in Canada was about $15.4 billion. We have also identified the topmost exported goods from Canada to Brazil, and these include fertilizers constituting 45.4% of the total Canadian exports to Brazil, machinery and parts at 11.8%, mineral fuels and oils at 7.1%, and aircraft and parts at 5.9%. On the other hand, Brazil also exports numerous products to the Canadian markets too, and it includes inorganic chemicals constituting 27.1% of the total Brazilian exports to Canada, precious stones and metals at 23.5%, machinery at 7.7%, and iron and steel at 4.7%. Now coming to the analysis of the free trade agreement under negotiation between Canada and the Mercosur members. The scope of the FTA seeks to cover different aspects, including trade in goods, trade in services, trade facilitation, customs cooperation, investment, government procurement, and competition policies between the various market participants, among other major topics. The expected benefits of having a free trade agreement in place is that there would definitely be tariff reductions. In addition to that, we believe that the FTA would also enhance trade and investment flows, bring about sustainable prosperity to all parties to the FTA, ensure trade liberalization, and most importantly, open markets for each other's goods and services. Through this FTA, we firmly believe that there would be ample opportunities for companies both in Canada and Brazil, wherein there would be favorable trading terms between the two, thereby providing access to each other's markets. The Canadian government also predicts that once the FTA comes into place, there will be a boost in Canada's real GDP by $1.3 billion for the Mercosur members collectively, a combined GDP growth of about $1.6 billion. We could also expect to see gains in different sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, forestry, a general balance in the economy, and also promotion of small and medium enterprises in both regions with increased jobs and more income to the people. We would like to highlight at this juncture that while the FTA is being negotiated between Canada and the Mercosur members, Brazil, a member of the Mercosur, is one of the driving forces in the negotiation process. And this shows the sheer importance of Brazil in developing trade relations between Canada and the Mercosur members. No partnership is always a bed of rose petals only. There have been ups and downs in the past between Brazil and Canada, wherein Brazil had initiated a trade dispute at the WTO in 2017 concerning commercial aircrafts. But it was recently mutually decided between the two countries to use the arbitration dispute settlement mechanism offered by the WTO to resolve this. This brings to light the comprehensible trade relation existing between Canada and Brazil. We would also like to bring to the attention of the audience there are multiple sunset reviews planned to be initiated against the US exporters by Brazil in the upcoming year. We look at the culmination of both the development of the FTA and the sunset reviews as an opportunity for Canadian exporters to make their products more competitive and affordable for the customers in the Mercosur region as compared to the US products. Brazil can also be used as a springboard for Canadian exporters to enter the Latin American markets, which boast of a consumer population of over 261 million, as recently in 2019. With markets opening up, it is always advisable to have someone on board who could render advice on the ground realities. This is where Sidera Consult could step in. We have on board lawyers, economists, accountants, foreign affairs specialists, and international business experts. With over a century of combined business and consultancy experience in local and international markets, we could help in not only providing services after the FTA comes into force, but also before that. We also have more than 30 years of experience working with governments and jurisdictions worldwide. Entering advice in relation to investment, accessing the markets not only in Brazil, but also in other countries of the Mercosur, facilitating the government in aligning regulations and procedures is also something that we could help with. We also have the necessary expertise to carry out market studies and analysis and also conduct negotiation proceedings. I would now like to invite my colleague from Sidera Consult, Ricardo Rossi, to throw some light on the sustainability and mobility aspects in relation to the FTA.
Thank you, Nikhita. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will put my presentation on the screen. Here we are. So I am Ricardo Rossi, Senior Advisor for Mobility, Technology and Sustainability at Sidera Consult. Following these words from my colleague Nikhita Pais, I will talk about commercial opportunities from the sustainable point of view. Sorry. Okay. Port St. John, with its entire logistics network, allows for the transit of goods and the connection between points interested in negotiating. With structures like this, it is possible to shorten distances, make paths possible, accelerate business. That's what I'm going to talk about today. What if the desire to make paths possible could transform a community and positively change the way they move around? What if we could see this transformation expand and exceed limits that not even the original dream envisioned? We will talk about this throughout this presentation and how a student undergraduate work could reach much larger dimensions, proving that well-taken advantage of opportunities have everything to be successful. We all know the potential of Brazil to lead initiatives aimed at a more sustainable world, the development and use of alternative fuels such as ethanol and biodiesel, the potential for insolation and wind currents that favor the deployment of photovoltaic and wind generators respectively, the conscious use of their natural resources, and the preservation of forests are a few good examples. However, decades of harmful policies, corruption, and incompetence have subdued this potential, leaving Brazil in a state of stagnation and even the regression of positive steps in some areas. Greater trade integration with countries that implement strong sustainable policies can help Brazil step up its game and review its sustainable and environmental role in the world. In this sense, the free trade agreement between Canada and Mercosur is an important tool to assist Brazil in coming back into a more sound and sustainable path. Although the Brazilian energy matrix is one of the cleanest in the world, since it's based on hydroelectric generation, the model is questioning its sustainable character since the implementation of hydroelectric plants still interferes considerably in ecosystems. Alternatives such as photovoltaic and wind generation are much less impactful to the environment. The Brazilian solar potential is one of the greatest incentives for the migration of our energy matrix. According to our National Institute of Space Research, the solar national capacity covers up to 5.5 kilowatts hour per square meter of the Brazilian territory. Probably this isolated number does not say much for most, but in practice indicates that the less sunny region of Brazil receives more solar incidence than the more sunny region of Germany, which is one of the world leaders in the photovoltaic energy use. In July of this year, Brazil exceeded 6 gigawatts of installed solar energy capacity. Since 2012, the solar energy sector has accumulated investments of 32 billion reais and generated about 108,000 jobs. By 2025, centralized solar generation has guaranteed projects already contracted through government procurement of around 25.8 billion reais. Despite the growth, these solar sources still correspond to only 0.5% of the energy used by the 84.4 million consumers of electricity in Brazil. The potential the potential for investments in this area is enormous. And a large Canadian company has been participating intensely in this growth, Canadian Solar, which is also already installed in Brazil. And this year has secured a new financing of $30 million through the China Portuguese speaking countries cooperation and development fund to develop and build photovoltaic projects in Brazil. From that, 1.7 gigawatts worth of projects in the pipeline have already been developed and contracted through government procurement, and 408 megawatts is already operational. Wind energy is already the second large source of the Brazilian energy matrix, representing 9.3% of the energy generation. The largest source, the hydroelectric plant, represents 59.6%. According to the Brazilian Wind Energy Association, the installed capacity in the country reached the 16 gigawatts mark in the first half of 2020. There are 637 wind farms and 7,738 wind turbines. The development of the wind industry in Brazil can be explained by the quality of Brazilian winds. They are stable with the right intensity and without sudden changes in speed or direction. That said, with all Brazilian potential for the generation of clean energy, even if Brazil does not see itself in a prominent position in the conduct of the agenda of the global sustainability, access to information and, above all, the increase in the global awareness that something must be done to stop the path of self-destruction allows for the observation of encouraging data, and that they should increase the pressure on our rulers to align their speech with their actions. 71% of Brazilians interviewed by ICS, Instituto Clima e Sociedade, believe that the biggest cause of air pollution is motorized means of transport, with the car being the answer given by 42% of the total. 67% of respondents said they would give up individual transportation for a cleaner one. Only 29% answered no, mainly because having its own mode of transportation is more comfortable. But Brazilian mentality is changing and following the desire to adapt old habits. Incentives are lacking, but there are many opportunities. The research conducted by ICS in March 2020 reveals that Brazilians already believe that cycling is the best means of transport for the day-to-day, second only to the subway. Perhaps the subway has already lost its first position for the bike, as the effects of the pandemic have highlighted the safety of this vehicle in the face of transport that inevitably agglomerates people in confined spaces. In the city of São Paulo, for example, 60% of trips are between 2 and 5 kilometers. That is, most routes in the city can be done by bicycle. Given this, the bicycle is consolidated not only as a viable option, but also as the best means of transportation. So this is the point where I started to answer those questions I did at the beginning of the presentation. Some Canadian companies have taken advantage of this potential, such as Cervelo, which exports bicycles and their components to Brazil, and PBSC, which exports Canadian technology to Tembici, a Brazilian initiative that promotes bike sharing. When Mauricio Vilar launched Pedal USP in 2011, despite his bold plans, he did not imagine that the viability of his graduation project on the campus of the University of São Paulo could have the reach it has today. There were 4 bicycles for free sharing among university students who were entitled to trips of up to 20 minutes to circulate in the USP University City. Pedal USP has evolved into Tembici, and today it allows thousands of Brazilians access to cheap and sustainable transport, both for work and leisure, increasing free flow in cities, which favors the economy of any country. With a factory in the south of Minas Gerais, Tembici integrated technology from the Canadian company PBSC Urban Solutions to improve the experience of its users, and became a regional exporter, sending shareable bicycles to cities such as Buenos Aires in Argentina and Santiago de Chile. The access and market expansion of PSBC together with TEMBC is an interesting case, and Sidera Consults offers full support to companies that wish to make this move, regardless of their origin or the markets they want to reach, since Sidera has a global presence. According to the Brazilian Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Services, there was a 118% increase in exports of bicycles from 2018, and this is caused by TEMBC exports. Canada is among the fourth largest exporters of bicycle components to Brazil, and the other three countries are all from Asia. The biggest motivation for importing bicycle components is the lack of domestic manufacturers. TEMBC also believes that there is much to be achieved in the scenario of the urban mobility, but that is already a reality. The text here is a testimony about the Brazilian who started using TEMBC to replace public transport when going to work, and with what he saved, it was possible to include meat on a month in his family's budget. The gradual change in displacements within the city is clear, providing prevention to avoid agglomerations in addition to being an option for a more sustainable lifestyle. Thus, the bicycle must live in an optimistic future, whether by prevention, encouragement of governments or change of habits of people already visible around the world. The theme of sustainability goes far beyond mobility, but these are some examples of opportunities that open up as the new technologies are incorporated into Brazilian potential. Canada is a developed country and has great capacity to share its experiences with Brazil's path in growing as a sustainable power through partnerships that are mutually beneficial. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, Nikhita, for this great presentation. So without further ado, I would like to invite our next speakers, Arnon Melo, President at MELLOHAWK Logistics, and Peter Hawkins, Managing Director at MELLOHAWK Logistics, and also the co-chair of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, to talk a little bit about import and export procedures between Brazil and Canada. So Arnon and Peter, the mic's yours. You're on mute.
Okay, I'm back. Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen okay now?
Yes, it's just not in full screen.
Perfect, thanks. There you go. Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you to the BCCC, the CCBC, Port of St. John, and everyone involved in this webinar. Great to be back here with you. So let's talk about logistics, of course, which is a key component of doing international trade. I am the president and founder of MELLOHAWK Logistics, and we are a full-fledged freight forwarder. We move cargo around the world by air, ocean, and trucking, of course, and Brazil is a niche market for us because I am Brazilian, 30 years in Canada now, but always involved with Brazil. And one of the services, of the many services that MELLOHAWK does, is consulting. And on this past year, we've really expanded our reach on the small and mid-sized businesses that wanted to do start a new business because of the pandemic. So we saw a really busy year between Brazil and Canada, and it's been really, really rewarding to be able to share some knowledge with companies that were starting and have been doing this trade for many years. And let's see if I can move. So we've done many projects through the year, chartering planes, moving radioactive equipment from Canada to Argentina, and building biodiesel plants all over the world for our Canadian clients. But we also have been advising on Canadian companies that want to export to Brazil and Brazilian companies that want to penetrate in Canada. MELLOHAWK is an award-winning company. We really invested in education for our employees. 2 of them have won the Young Freight Forwarder of the Year for CIFA, the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association. And my partner, Peter, who is here today with me, is a two-time award winner for his work and dedication in helping newcomers to Canada find work in their field. So congratulations to Peter. I think when we talk about international trade and supply chain, the first thing we should talk about is Incoterms. So if all of you are actually thinking of doing trade between Canada and Brazil or any part of the world, please make sure Incoterms is part of your contracts, your commercial invoices, any shipping documents, because that's going to secure you and dictate the transfer of risk and cost between your seller and the buyer. So most people know FOB and CIF, but of course in 2020, we have 11 terms. And I like to say here that Brazilians, especially Brazilian companies, like to ask Canadian companies to do calculations on a DDP, meaning for Canadian companies to ship something to Brazil, clear customs and deliver, pay duties and taxes. And so you're going to learn today that the DDP term into Brazil is not allowed. So if a Brazilian company comes to you asking you to calculate duties and taxes in Brazil, it's not possible. An importation in Brazil can only be done by a local company with a CNPJ number, a business number, and they must have a radar. So when you're negotiating something, please negotiate. Tell your buyer in Brazil, look, I can ship it to the airport or to the local port, and I know that you have to do customs clearance and pay duties and taxes. So it's very, very difficult to calculate duties and taxes in Brazil when you are abroad, of course. So it's very, very hard. And we are here to also help you maneuver these requests on Incoterms if you needed to. But now you know DDP in Brazil is not allowed. In Canada, importing into Canada is way much easier, of course, and a foreign company in Canada can also be an import of record in Canada. So who can import in Canada? As I said, very, very easy. A sole proprietorship can import, a partnership, a corporation. And most companies that are small and they're starting SMEs, they start at a sole proprietorship and then they move on to a corporation as they're starting to do business. But Canada has a very easy process of importing goods and doing business internationally, of course. Another issue with Canadian imports starting in 2021 in full force, it has been sort of in practice for the last 4 years, is called e-manifest, which is the pre-declaration of goods before they leave the origin country. So now, starting next year, fines will be imposed. Everything that is shipped to Canada by air, ocean, and trucking must be declared to Canada Customs prior to leaving the country of origin. This declaration is done by a freight forwarder. It's not done by the carrier like it used to be. So please be very careful how you're getting goods shipped to Canada, because if we don't do this pre-declaration, we, the freight forwarder, can be fined $5,000 and also the customer. So you're going to see a lot of this coming up in January 2021. So importing into Canada, for those who don't know, it's on a federal level. So, and we have basically two types of taxes only in Canada. You have the duty based on the HS code or NCM of the product, plus 5% GST, goods and service tax. And if you're importing food products into Canada, most of food products in Canada are duty-free and they are GST-free. So we're happy to help you calculate your goods if you're importing into Canada. And once they are imported, of course, and I get this question a lot, you will sell your goods locally in Canada and then you charge the HST 13% to your final consumer. Another very strict process is the importation of food items in Canada. The CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, started in January 2019, a new Safety Food for Canadians Act. And now every import and bringing food into Canada must have an account with CFIA, must have their goods properly labeled before they arrive in Canada, and they must pay a fee to import these goods. Canada is very concerned with the products that come from all over the world for Canadians to consume, and they want to make sure that you, the importer, know how to import food, how to distribute, and especially how to remove the food from a shelf at a supermarket if something goes wrong with that product and there is a recall. So strict rules to importation of food. We're happy to work with you to show you this new process. And I like to throw here as well that, and we're going to talk, of course, the incentives of shipping directly to Canada via Port of Saint John, because when goods come directly into Canada and not via the US, it's much easier, even if your product goes through inspection, to be cleared directly into Canada instead of transiting in the US soil. Import restrictions in Canada, of course, we have many restrictions. Dairy products that need a quota, of course. If you cannot get a quota, which is very difficult these days, you will pay on some cheese items, for example, catupiry. A lot of people like to import catupiry into Canada. It's 255% duty for catupiry. So any broker can clear, of course, any dairy products. But another question that I get is about alcohol beverages. And of course, this is really highly controlled by province, LCBO and SAC in Quebec. And it is a process that I don't want to discourage anyone, but you need to work with their governing bodies in order to have a permission to import alcohol into Canada. Also, for alcohol beverages, LCBO in Ontario only has one broker that is allowed to clear this, of course, with the pre-authorization of LCBO. So it's not, no other freight forwarder or customs broker can clear alcoholic beverages into Canada. And for those Canadian companies exporting from Canada, October 1st, 2020 brought the new Canadian Export Reporting System, CERS, and now the declaration of exports from Canada is done on a web-based program. Every goods over $2,000 Canadian must be reported during the export process. This is for statistical purposes, of course. And some countries that have a trade restriction with Canada, you must get an export permit for that specific goods from Global Affairs before you can export it. And then that number goes into the CERS declaration. So happy to talk to you about this as well. So the B13, as we knew before, no longer exists. It's not a software that you download on your computer and do it. Now everything is web-based with the new CERS program. Of course, I always talk about know your destination in Canada. You know why. Canada is a very large country with very remote locations. Despite the facility that we have to ship cargo anywhere by truck, by ocean, or by plane, but you need to know where your customer is located to make sure you get the product closer as possible to your final consumer. Of course, we are here to help you in any customs clearance and any point of entry in Canada. And of course, as I mentioned before, using direct routes to Canada, Port of Saint John, which has been working fantastic in receiving containers from Brazil, and Port of Montreal as well, avoiding the US if possible due to inspection and many issues that are happening due to COVID. And you know, depending on the product you're crossing in the US can hold a container or any air shipment for inspection, causing you costs in storage if that happens. Of course, Canada is blessed with a rail system that goes from coast to coast, not only across Canada, but also completely North America from the US. Different than Brazil, and I hope Brazil one day gets their rail system in place. So containers moved in Canada via rail with multi-million dollars between CN Rail and CP Rail, taking containers from Montreal to the West Coast or Port of Saint John to the West Coast if necessary by rail. Also, when I talk about rail, normally the movement of rail is connected with the movement of ocean freight. So we don't do things separated. Some people ask me, can you give me a rail quote from this port to whatever destination? Well, it doesn't work like that. Normally, when we book an ocean shipment, the entire process of that movement is already connected and we know how it's going to be departing and arriving. So you don't break as much the charges on movement from point A to point B. Well, did you know that air and ocean shipments into Canada can take as little as 15 minutes to an hour to be cleared? And in the case we're talking Port of St. John. Normally 2 days prior to vessel arrival, we get a manifest for that container or that product coming in, and we file the customs clearance with Canada Customs. And 90% of the time or 95% of the time, that product is pre-cleared before the vessel docks at the port. So you see how easy it is. If something goes for inspection in Canada, we're looking at 24 hours to 72 hours, which is very critical. And after 24 hours, we can call Canada Customs and say, how come my product is not cleared yet? And also, Canada Customs in Canada is open 24 hours, 7 days a week. So we can clear any shipment at 4 o'clock in the morning if you need to. Most of the clearance are electronically, of course, but in Canada, any company can go in person to customs and file their own import declaration and pay the duties and taxes on the spot. Of course, there's some work that goes into it, so most companies prefer to do an electronic transmission. Another interesting aspect of Canada for those who are abroad is that Canada allows a foreign company to register themselves in Canada and be their own importer of record in Canada. So this is really useful if you want to send samples or smaller shipments for a potential Canadian client. We can help you register your company in Canada, clear customs under your own name, and then execute the delivery to your potential new customer. After you establish, of course, that pattern, it is advisable that your importer is the import of record and continues to pay duties and taxes on their shipment. And as I said before, if you're shipping food items to Canada, please use direct routes. Try to avoid the US. I know some routes via the US are cheaper, but you can run into very heavy storage and inspection fees if your container is pulled for inspection in US soil. And of course, during the pandemic, we have created a system of a consolidation from Santos to Toronto, our first ever reefer or frozen consolidated container, which means we're able to help several companies that were bringing frozen products from Brazil. And because the Air Canada flight was canceled for many months and only now has 3 departures a week, we're able to help establish Brazilian and Canadian companies bringing frozen food items from Brazil into Toronto, clearing it here and then distributing it across Canada. We're also we're on our 3rd reefer container now in January, and we're starting a dry LCL consolidation as well, because we believe that if companies can plan and use a direct service to Canada without touching US soil, you can minimize the cost on your logistics. So talk to us as well about this if you have any questions. E-commerce and fulfillment. This was a time that we saw a lot of SMEs starting their own business, and we have been helping many companies bring their products from other countries, stocking them in our warehouse, and then connecting our system with their e-commerce platform. So when customers bought their product, we received an order in our system and then ship out small packages all over Canada and the US, like a mini Amazon. So if you want, if you're interested in this service, we can talk to you at a later time as well. But this is a trend that we see coming up more and more now that, you know, actual stores are closed and people are buying things online. You have no idea how easy it is for you to start your own e-commerce fulfillment service. And talking a little bit about the milestones of COVID-19, this year was a tremendous year of many changes globally, of course. As I mentioned, Air Canada canceled their flights for many months between Sao Paulo and Toronto, and many products that came on that flight could not make it to Canada, delaying several food products. So now they've reestablished their flights, but they're still having only 3 flights a week with somewhat limited capacity. Also, the lack of containers in various markets, especially China, causing delays of equipment worldwide, as empty containers are getting returned empty to China because, of course, rates are going up, and China is still shipping a lot of products worldwide, despite of the backlog caused in the beginning of COVID. Huge West Coast congestion right now in Los Angeles, Vancouver. So containers coming out of China into Toronto normally it took 20 days, now are taking up to 50 days to reach Toronto. So this also creates an opportunity to enter Canada via the East Coast, Port of St. John again, due to the flexibility and great work that has been done there and flexibility in their services. Also, the strike in Port of Montreal a few months ago did not help this backlog, and where several ships were diverted to St. John. Thank God St. John was operational, and Halifax. And still, we see the effects of the delay and strike at the Montreal port. The port is return to normal operations, but there's still a lot of delays happening because of the weeks that the port didn't work. And again, I know we talk about Port of St. John quite a bit because the partnership has been incredible. And it is, again, an alternative for your containers into Canada, because once they're there, they're put on the rail, and basically a container from St. John to Toronto, in 2 days, I will have that container, and has worked fantastic on this route, not only to Toronto and Montreal, but also to the west coast of Canada, where we have delivered machinery from Brazil and grains as well, and fertilizers from Brazil to Calgary and Saskatoon using Port of St. John. And I'm sure Shannon has a lot to show us and tell us the amazing infrastructure that the port has. So this is my presentation, and now I hope I left enough time for Peter. So thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here, and thanks, Arno. I'm going to just pick up with my presentation so we can just speed along things. So give me one moment here, and I will do my share screen and find my presentation and start my slideshow. And whoops.
Bottom right.
Yeah, bottom right is not coming up though. So just bear with me for a second. Here we go. So thank you all. I'm going to jump right into it. So with logistics, one of the things that people ask is, why do you use a freight forwarder, and what are the concerns? And the concerns are things like everything from, we are the first stop to watch for entrance of drugs and terrorism. We are the ones who can warn you about the problems with lithium batteries. We can warn you about news and delays at various ports. We are concerned about money laundering, and so we watch the series of payments. We are the first stop for pests coming both ways, so that if there are pests that are going to impact a market, we want you to make sure that you understand how we can prevent those. We can warn you about spring thaw. When something comes to Canada in a container, the weights have to be reduced, because as the frost goes out of the ground becomes softer, and heavier containers can't travel on those until the ground firms up as the water leaks out. So I want you to all understand the value of freight forwarders. Specific to Brazil, if you're importing to Brazil, you need to have a Hedaro, as Arno talked about, which is a document and a registration in Brazil for importing. You have to make sure that your client can import. You have to make sure that your documents are approved. You have to find out if you need a trading company, and a trading company is very common in Brazil, not in Canada. Do you need Anvisa approval? And so, and you need to make sure you're compliant with all the government regulations. And generally, governments cannot import. So that's important to understand too, that if the government is your client, you might have to find a middleman to do the shipping. So those are some very important issues to consider when you're shipping to Brazil. When you're looking for a partner going both directions, a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to do all my local sales and then look internationally. You have to do it simultaneously. It isn't effective for you to exhaust your current client and not look around the world, because the world is traveling so fast online that everybody is seeing everything immediately. So there isn't a case of exploring your local market and then going elsewhere. You have to use chambers of commerce. You have to use boards of trade like the CCBC and the BCCC. Really valuable insight. And great opportunity for connections. You have to use the Trade Commissioner Service. Global Affairs has trade commissioners in all the key cities, and it's free. They are excellent. They're on the ground. They are knowledgeable. The Canadian Trade Commissioners in Brazil are really the #1 group in the world. And I'm not talking about Canadians. I'm talking about all trade commissioners from all countries. Their knowledge is extensive, and it's free, and they're accessible. Now, obviously, we can't go on trade missions and trade shows now, but we can do virtual ones. And why do we want to do those? Is because we're promoting the Canadian brand. The Canadian brand is, especially when you're exporting, is reliable. It is compliant. It is safe. It is quality. Those are things that we really want people to understand. And also, the reason why we're looking at Brazil so much is not just the potential of the new free trade agreement with Mercosur, but also because trade diversification is a way to safeguard your trade. You can't put all your eggs in one basket as we have so easily done. Now we really have to move things around. I'm speaking fast because I'm worried about the time. When you're doing your meetings, are you a bad boyfriend? One thing that I want everybody to remember is you must follow up. You must follow up quickly. Don't wait. You must act quickly. You must be well aware of EDC. EDC is Export Development Corporation, which can help you close a sale and get your buyer to insure against potential loss. How will you be paid? Pay attention to currency. And Brazilians are born with a currency calculator in their heads, but Canadians are lazy about it, and you have to pay attention to it to find what are the best rates and to help you, and what are the best currencies to help you. When you are actually shipping and selling, you've got to get to know your market. And part of that is making sure that you have either a member of your staff or a serious partner who knows your export market. And that goes both ways. What's really important, I think, is a lot of Canadians think they can export to Brazil and it'll be relatively easy. And because it's a complicated place, and because Brazilians want to complain to somebody locally, you must have a trustworthy partner. Likewise, Brazilians coming to Canada, you can't do it cold. You have to have someone here who has the contacts, who has the network. And you also have to be aware of just who your competition is. A lot of people are in love with their product from Brazil, and when they ship it to Canada, they're shocked that people aren't buying it. Either it's because only Brazilians here know it, or between the duty and the shipping costs, it's just too expensive. So for instance, catupiry is an interesting example that Arnon gave. With catupiry, with a 255% duty, that product that is only 7 reais in Brazil is actually $25 for the same small piece in Canada. No one's going to buy it. It's a specialty item. So you have to really pay attention to that. Now, the people that are in the catupiry market, they know what they're doing, and they are working aggressively to try to get that price down, but it is very complicated. The Brazilian the Brazilian exporter needs to have permission to export. So we have to make sure that they can do that, and they have to make sure that they can do that. We have to, if you can't meet in person, cyber meeting is actually the way to go, obviously, but it's not just one meeting, not one Zoom call. It's many Zoom calls. So I want everybody to really realize that you need to actually build a relationship. Building a relationship means communicating regularly and consistently. You have to make sure too that when you are shipping internationally, that you're selling something the market wants to buy. Don't sell a product that you're in love with. Sell a product that's solving a problem. So whether it's a food item or a electronic item, it has to be very clear that this is something that the market wants, not something that you just love to promote. Make sure your marketing material is appropriately translated into either English and French in Canada or into Portuguese in Brazil. Make sure that any special shipping handling stuff has been considered. You don't want to ship air. You want the packaging to be optimized. And that means too that somebody can drop it 3 feet or a meter, just under a meter, and it will survive. So that's what packaging really means. Make sure you have the correct tariff code classification, because that is so important when you determine duties and taxes. Make sure you know the Incoterm rules, and it's really important. People always say, it's so hard. It's not hard. It is detailed. There's a big difference. Okay, so what do we see for the hot imports into Canada? we see food, prepared, frozen, processed, and we see candy and chocolate. So that includes acai. A lot of people ask me about acai and acai pulp and acai prepared things. It is a saturated market here. Lots of people are bringing acai, and Canadians don't really know the distinction between quality and poor quality and what's it being mixed with. Is it going to be mixed with coconut water, or is it mixed with apple juice or something like that? So that distinction is lost on us. So yes, there is a market here, but there are lots of players. The same with coffee. Coffee is a very tough market, and people are building up relationships. And if you're not in it, everybody else is in it ahead of you. So I would, if you have the best product, which so far every possible exporter from Brazil has told me that they have the very best product, you need to really make sure you have a partnership rather than go it alone. What else we see? Wood flooring, some construction materials. We see lots of metal pieces for construction. Frozen fish. Now, so for the first three were big Brazilian ones. Frozen fish, we actually see that from other countries. Clothing, high-end and specialty, that's usually from China, Pakistan. Metal parts, machinery for repair and return, that is a Brazilian thing that we see a lot of. Educational books, toys, games, and related, that's all from China. Huge market with all the homeschooling. PPE and hand sanitizer, that's all huge. And that's still ongoing, even though people aren't making any money on it now. Part of the problem there was so many things arrived that either weren't compliant with what the requirements are, or they had mold on them. So big risky thing. Hand sanitizer, lots of recalls. We've seen lots of people hurt themselves. The hot exports, what's leaving Canada? Mining equipment, heavy machinery, mining technology going to Brazil, tons of it. Hand sanitizer, it's going both directions. We see lots of hand sanitizer going particularly into the US. Electronics, broadcasting equipment, technology, drones, that's going to Brazil. High fashion and fashion retail, that's global for us. That's a big market for us. Some Canadian foodstuffs, it's not just maple syrup, but some other prepared Canadian goods are selling. HVAC, air treatment technology, that seems to be shipping quite a bit. A lot of that's to Europe. Bacteria, chemical reagents, and non-COVID-19 vaccines. That's all going to Brazil for us. The non-COVID-19 vaccines would be things like hepatitis vaccines. Outdoor sports equipment, bicycles, bicycle parts, motorcycle parts. We're seeing a lot of movement there, which is very exciting, but it's also, it shows that people are getting outside even though they're not talking to each other. I also wanted to just draw your attention to a couple of news things that I saw today. There are some concerns. For instance, Asia containers to Northern Europe have now hit $10,000 USD. That is shocking. That's a shocking number. So we have to watch pricing. We have to be very careful. The US regulators are also complaining because a lot of ships and shipping lines are going back to China with their containers empty rather than pick up agricultural exports from the US. Why? It's because they're trying to get the containers back to China as fast as possible to ship out. An example of the size of the containers. All the world is this and China is this. Okay, I really want you to understand how many containers are in China comparatively. So US regulators are now very concerned about it and are making some complaints. Volumes on the US West Coast are up 30% in November year over year, and that is both for LA and Long Beach, and it's also for Vancouver, and as a result we have congestion. On the East Coast it's also 30%, but because the volumes were so much lower, we don't have congestion yet, and that's what makes Port St. John such an attractive gateway for us. Arnon was talking about foodstuffs. One other note I wanted to note, one of the reasons why the CFIA is so careful, especially with samples at food shows like Cial, etc., is because of the past listeria outbreaks and things like that we've had. You have to be super, super, super careful. So beyond that, I was being super fast, open to questions, open to any other conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Arnon, for this great presentation. Very insightful. I'm still shocked with the $10,000 from China to Europe per container. This is insane. So without further ado, I would like to introduce now Shannon Blanchard, Cargo Development Manager at Port St. John, to talk a little bit about more of the capabilities of the port and why Port St. John is the best connection into Canada for Brazilian exporters. Thank you, Shannon. Mike is yours.
Thank you, Carolina. Just going to get my presentation up and running. Just to confirm that you're able to see the screen okay?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. So for those of you who I have not come in contact with, either here in Canada or in Brazil, I'm Shannon Blanchard, and I'm the manager of cargo development at Port St. John. My role is what I would say is twofold. One is that my main objective is to look at building bilateral trade within our container connectivities globally. And in addition to that, I'm a collaborator. So essentially, I seek out opportunities in which I can build a program, not just for importers and exporters, but also with supply and services companies, freight forwarders, associations, etc., to work with them alongside to build upon the first piece of my objective, which is building that bilateral trade piece. So I'm going to leave that point with you at the beginning, but I'll also mention it again at the end, because you'll see how the intricacies and the collaborative piece and the facilitation makes sense in building a program through the Port of St. John. So for those of you who are unaware of our location, we are in the Atlantic, so on the east coast of Canada. We're in the province of New Brunswick, and the perfect point that I wanted to note was our proximity to large major population bases. So while we don't have a significant population in New Brunswick, we do have easy access to the Central Canadian and Quebec markets, as well as being only 100 kilometers from the US border. So it's a great entry and exit point to gain access into those marketplaces. So to give you perspective, we are the largest port in Atlantic Canada by volume. And the beauty with the Port of St. John is that we are not niche in container business. We aren't niche in break bulk or bulk, but we are able to handle all types of cargo moves within the Port of St. John. So our annual volume on average is about 27 million metric tons. And with our container connectivity, we have access to 500 ports globally. So that really kind of hits home with respect to how New Brunswick, little New Brunswick, can actually have access to international markets. So to give you kind of a bird's eye view and an idea of the diversity we have, just keeping in mind the location of the bottom left, which is our DP World container terminal, we have a wide variety of different operations with respect to cruise, break bulk, liquid bulk, dry bulk, and most of these are taking place with long-term concessions with major exporters that hit a lot of the global markets. In particular, just to note, and what actually brought us to really focusing on Brazil as a growth potential for us would be our Nutrien Campo-Tex facility, where they're shipping 1 million metric tons of potash per year. And I would say 80% of that is actually being exported today into South America, and in particular into Brazil. So that's really the story of how we led ourselves into fostering some of these relationships in the Brazilian market. So for the purpose of today, I'm going to move my conversation strictly onto the container side of our business and how we can add value with our supply chain partners to have a seamless connectivity between Canada and Brazil. So I have mentioned DP World. So for those of you who are not familiar with DP World, they are actually one of the larger terminal operators with respect to containers globally. So they currently have over 80 concessions worldwide. They have a big presence in South Central America and the Caribbean, as well as in Canada. So they're a great ally and partner for us in St. John, where they have that reciprocal connectivity in markets. So with respect to Brazil, they're currently operating at the Port of Santos, but that doesn't limit us as far as how we can connect to a wide variety of ports in Brazil. DP World has the concession in St. John for over 40 years. So this is a new lease for us, just taking place in 2017. So we have a long time to grow this business with DP World, which is great from, I guess, a consistency perspective in fostering and growing those relationships with both importers and exporters, as well as the shipping lines and the rail providers that we have access to here in St. John. The overall size of the terminal that DP World operates today is 54 acres, but that's growing. Keep that in mind when I talk about some future developments and growth for us. They do have direct access to rail at their facilities, which is great for accessing those larger major population bases and a quite efficient flow. I'll get into more specifics relative to those inland connections, so stay tuned. With respect to, I guess, one point that both Peter and Arnon mentioned was the high degree of perishable products or food products. And maintaining that cold chain is very important with respect to both imports and exports. And in St. John, we're actually investing heavily to support that type of move to keep that cold supply chain throughout the duration of accessing to the final destination. So we have increased our refrigerated plugs, which the container actually plugs into to maintain the cold temperature. We've increased it to 481 from just 200 this year. So we understand the growth potential with respect to these types of moves, and we're investing in those particular areas. We're also working with potential third-party investors and looking at what that potential may look like for import connectivity that would require distribution and warehousing in cold storage. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would really suggest that you reach out to me so that I can better understand what your needs would look like. So in addition to operating the day-to-day work at the container terminal, DP World also offers a wide variety of value-add services. So for one, they do offer an NVOCC, so a non-vessel operating common carrier business that is positioned in South America. They're there to help develop a supply chain solution for both importers and exporters. In addition to that, they do have warehousing location on the port of St. John. That's a great access point for storage, warehousing, distribution, stuffing and de-stuffing or transloading services right at the port. And they're also committed to investing in equipment and container handling, cranes, as well as new technologies to ensure that they're building upon a very effective and efficient flow of goods both in and out of the Port of St. John. So with respect to those that I've already mentioned for the value-added services, one area that I really wanted to touch on is that warehouse capability that DP World offers right at the Port of St. John facilities. So as you can see from the picture that's located on your screen right now, these three warehouses combined offer about 450,000 square foot of warehouse space. So this is dry space. These three warehouses are connected directly to rail. So it's a great intermodal connectivity for containers being stuffed, de-stuffed, moved off, moved on to the terminal. So in addition to their regular business, this is one that DP World is interested in growing with importers and exporters. And for any information relative to building out that piece and looking at what the warehouse options could look like, or having any of those transload facility operations done on your behalf, DP World can provide those rates. And how I can help is help facilitate that discussion with DP World directly. So I do have a video here real quick that will give you kind of an overview of the facilities, and where you can't be here in person to tour it directly, you can see it on your screens right now. So to give you a little bit of perspective as to how the Port of St. John has grown over the last year, in particular, it's hard to believe that I can even say this, but Port of St. John has always been heavy on exports, and to a tune of 90% of our volume being exports, 10% imports. And we've been able to change that over the last year with some of the work that we've done in market, in particular in Brazil. We've seen that change to 78-22. So we're seeing that kind of balance of trade leveling out just over the last year. But what's really impressive is on our imports. Just over the last year, year over year, we've actually seen, get this, 250% growth on our import volume. So it's quite significant, especially in light of some of the challenges that we've seen through COVID-19 in the markets and the uncertainty related to COVID-19, as well as changes and challenges that have happened within the inland connectivity with rail, with some of the blockades and the challenges that they've experienced over the last year. So we're quite pleased to see that. But in order for us to maintain this growth, we need to think about the future. And luckily, we've been planning for this growth for a number of years, and happy to report that this year we've actually broken ground on a $205 million container terminal modernization project. That's a three-way partnership with the federal and provincial governments, as well as the Port of St. John, to increase our capacities at this particular terminal. So it'll allow for larger vessels to come in, it'll allow for more laydown, it'll allow for efficiencies in building out a larger rail program, and also having efficiencies in gaining access by truck. So this is due to be completed in 2023, just in time for us to actually reach our capacities and allow us to grow threefold by our volumes in our capacity for moving both imports and exports within our container sector. So pretty pleased about that. So why Brazil? And this is one other interesting thing that I have to note. Why do the lines choose St. John as one of their main connectors in looking at building their business in Brazil and connecting in South America? So look at the distances by nautical miles between St. John and New York. Now, thinking of a flat mat, you would think that naturally New York would be closer, but the reality is that St. John is actually equidistant to Santos, Brazil, as the Port of New York. And oddly enough, the Port of Baltimore is actually further away than the Port of St. John, even though we're positioned further north than Baltimore on a flat map. So this is why the shipping lines have really paid attention to the opportunities that St. John can add as a value for them in some of their operating costs. So let's get into those services now. So we have 2 weekly global services, 2 very different. The first service is with the Mediterranean Shipping Company, and their target market is specific to Atlantic Canada only through the Port of St. John. So their service is a north-south service where the transshipment or their hub is located in Freeport, Bahamas. So essentially what would happen is goods would leave St. John, they would be discharged off the vessel in Freeport, Bahamas, and then those containers would go on to another vessel destined for Brazil. And same on the northbound, the Brazilian vessel would connect in Freeport, Bahamas, and then be loaded onto the vessel connecting into Canada and make its way to St. John. So this service is a full container load service only, but they can provide a value of different equipment to offer high cubes or regular standard 20s or 40-foot containers or refrigerated containers, and also flat racks for any oversized or over-dimensional cargo that's looking to come into St. John. So I'll give you perspective onto the transit times, both north and southbound with MSC. So as you can see for the various points of origin, looking at the northbound transit time, you're ranging anywhere between 30 and 60 days. So understanding that this is a global service, so Brazil isn't necessarily their main target in growing business into Canada. And then on the southbound, you're looking at transit times anywhere between 29 as the lowest, up to 47. So a wide variety of ports, but their transit times are a little bit more significant than the other option. Now, keeping in mind, and Arnon did a great job at really explaining the Incoterms, sometimes longer transit times can actually be better for the buyer or the seller, depending on who you are, because that's when a long transit time can actually act as a floating warehouse. So if your cash flow makes sense because of your Incoterm, you can actually defer paying for your cargo until it gets into the port of St. John as an entry point, or on the southbound going into, say, the Port of Santos. So yes, I agree with both Arnon and with Peter. Incoterms are key in understanding what value is important. Is it transit time? Is it rates? What is important to you will definitely depend on that Incoterm and the nature of your business. So the second service that I wanted to talk about is a niche service. So their markets that they're interested in, CMA, CGM, is looking at Atlantic Canada, but also looking to position cargo into central Canada and the US Midwest. They're also interested in the areas of Maine, so that would be the US Northeast. And that's primarily because of our proximity to that marketplace in particular. So this is a weekly service, and their service is one that is also a north-south service. They have the same equipment available, and they also have the abilities to offer only full container load services. Now, the beauty with CMA CGM is that because they're a niche north-south service, they're constantly looking to upgrade and provide new connectivities, especially when we're looking at Brazil. So our service out of Canada with CMA CGM is called the Kajima service. That, very similar to MSC, transships in the south in Kingston, Jamaica. So it leaves St. John, touches in New York, Savannah, goes to Kingston, it offloads off of that vessel and goes on to one of 2 services, either the BrazX1 or the BrazX2. Now, Leading up to times before last month, there was only the BrazX1 service. So the service connectivities, a little bit longer transit time, less ports that were called in Brazil, but they've actually enhanced that service and added another vessel called the BrazX2 service that connects into more ports and also creating better transit times on the northbound and the southbound services through CMA CGM. So let me point those out to you. So on the northbound, as you can see, they call a wide variety of ports along the Brazilian coast. Their transit times northbound are between 20 and 30 days. Excuse me. And when you're looking at southbound, you're getting into some 20 transit days and the highest 42. So we're seeing a much better transit time through some of these diversified services with CMA CGM, where historically they were 30, 40 days, and in some cases 50 days. So we're seeing those enhancements. We're seeing better transit times. And this is allowing us to actually see, especially on the import side, Brazil is being one of our top 2 importing countries in the Port of St. John. So it just shows that, some of the work that we've been doing in market in Brazil, but also doing some work here in partnership with the chamber here, we're able to foster and grow business bilaterally. So we're quite pleased to see that we have this diversification. With respect to rates, I can help facilitate discussion with the shipping lines that are appropriate. I unfortunately cannot provide any rates directly, but I can help facilitate those discussions. If you're interested in reviewing different routes or rotations, different ports, I can help with that as well. But you can also reach out to a freight forwarder, and a better way to assist, not just in all of the documentation, the insurance, customs clearance work, all of the things that Arnon and Peter touched on, but they can also help facilitate the discussion for rates and transit times directly with the lines themselves. And if you're not used to doing imports and exports, just keep in mind that freight forwarders typically have better rates because they have volume. They're doing a lot of business with these lines and carriers already. Whereas if you're looking to ship 1 or 2 containers, you may not get it as well, as favorable as a rate that some of the freight forwarders would get. Now, inland, how do we get inland? 2 options. So we have road, and as you can see, St. John, New Brunswick here in the red, we're about a day's truck, day and a half, all the way through to central Canada, a day truck all the way down to Boston and into New York. So that's one option to get into those large major population bases. But the beauty with the Port of St. John is that we actually have optionality with respect to rail connections. Now, if you're looking at doing an all-in rate with the container line themselves, they do have particular negotiated contracts with specific lines. So while we have optionality for rail with both 2 Class 1 railways across Canada, as mentioned by MELLOHAWK, we have access to the Canadian Pacific as well as the Canadian National Railways that actually leave St. John and can go all the way to the west coast of Canada and right down, smack down in the center of the US, all the way down to Houston. The vessel for CMA in particular and how it would work would come into St. John on a Friday, offload, be inspected if required, cleared, and moved out by rail quite quickly, where it would reach Montreal on Monday and into the Toronto market by Tuesday. So as Arnon had mentioned, it's a pretty efficient and effective flow from the container carrier all the way through to the rail provider. Now, the services of CMA, if you were to look at that, for example, they actually have a contract with CN. So they can provide an all-in rate if that's something that you're interested in. one last point that I wanted to mention is that Port of St. John has worked with the local economic development agency, as well as the federal and provincial governments, to have St. John as designated as a foreign trade zone point. So there are 10 across Canada. And what is a foreign trade zone point? Most people are familiar with free trade zones, and they are a little bit different, where a foreign trade zone is actually the entire city of St. John. A free trade zone is typically a fenced-in geographic area. So what happens within a foreign trade zone point is that there are programs in place for imports. So two different programs. One would be a tax duty deferral. So if you're looking to import goods and then further export them into, say, the US market so that you're closer to your customers, you can store your goods for up to 4 years in a customs bonded warehouse and not pay duties and taxes until they're further re-exported. The other programs in place would have either a duty exemption, either partially or fully, when imported goods are used as part of a raw material in the creation of another good. And depending on what that looks like, the government in Canada, who would be collecting the duties and taxes, would determine at what level that would be modified. So these programs can be accessed through the Economic Development Greater St. John website, or you can reach out to Global Affairs Canada directly and get more information on how you can apply for these programs. And just in the matter of time, I'll wrap up there. And please feel free to ask any questions that you have, either through this forum or reach out to me directly. I've included my LinkedIn in the chat. And as just my last point, real quick, I am a facilitator of bilateral trade. I do work both in market in Brazil. At one point, I was there so much that I recall being at an event and one of the locals had asked me where I live in Brazil, and that's not a lie. But also equally, we do work here in Central Canada and Atlantic Canada to foster these bilateral relationships, and we love collaboration. We can facilitate discussions within any components of the supply chain, and I really strongly encourage you to reach out so that we can have direct discussions about what value add we can provide you as the Port of St. John. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for your presentation here today. And sorry about the sun. It's one of those winter days here in Toronto. Because of the time, we're going to limit a little bit of the questions. But if anyone has any questions that are not answered today, please feel free to connect either with CCBC with us, and we can answer it on a later moment. So I think I'm going to start with a question for Nikhita. So Nikhita, in your speech, you mentioned that there could be trade opportunities for Canadian companies in a special relation to US companies. So you also mentioned that this could be due to sunset reviews. Could you explain and elaborate more on how this could be possible?
Sure. Thank you, Carolina, for the question. So as per the provisions of WTO law, the anti-dumping duties imposed by a country are valid usually for a period of 5 years, after which they expire. Very often, the investigating authorities extend these duties for an additional period of 5 years. Like I mentioned during the presentation, there are no scheduled sunset reviews initiated by Brazil against Canada, but against certain US exporters of particular products, which implies that the US products would in all likelihood be more expensive when exported to Brazil due to the imposition of the dumping duties as compared to the Canadian counterparts. So we look at this, the Canadian exporters could use this as an opportunity to sell the similar products that the US exporters sell in the Brazilian markets at a more competitive price, and the mapping of the products and finding out what are the similar products or who are the exporters in the US and the Brazilian manufacturers is something what Sidera Consult can help with. So that was our relation there.
Thank you.
Okay. So now I'd like to get some feedback from Peter. Peter has already shared lots of interesting tips, and we are living in this new scenario, in a virtual scenario. So I want to ask you, Peter, how do you think cyber networking can be used into our advantage?
A year ago, I would have said cyber networking is the worst way to do it, but in fact, it's the only way. And what's interesting is all the decision makers are in the same situation that all the sellers are in, that we are all using the online format. So you, in fact, can totally control your image, your product image, your presentations right here in this little tiny camera. So what I want everybody to understand is two things. First of all, whatever you're selling, whichever direction you're selling, you can control it, you can create it. And whoever you want to reach is accessible now because they are online, they are looking for contacts. So in fact, what I have found is I've been able to reach a much higher level of decision maker this year than I ever did before, because everyone is in the same boat. But you must use, in fact, better professionalism when you're contacting everybody. Make sure you follow up. Make sure your English and Portuguese are spelled perfectly. Make sure your materials are excellent. And make sure you act quickly. Why? Because your competitor is not beside you. They're standing right ahead of you. So I want you to be sure and act quickly. So that's my tips for cyber networking.
Thank you, Peter.
So I have one quick question for Arnon. So Arnon, for you, in your opinion, what do you see as the trends for the future, like good and bad?
Good and bad. Great question. Well, first of all, we see a lot of comments from our clients that they're looking to source materials closer to where they are, avoiding long distance markets, despite cost, of course. But we'll see if that's gonna stay or not. And we also see a lot of people starting their own business on e-commerce and fulfillment, trying to develop, importing bulk, selling online, because there is a trend that has growing so much this year. But also a bad trend is that, as you can see, movement of containers, the space of containers around the world, if we're talking ocean, is diminishing. Lines are shipping empty containers to markets that they know they're going to make a lot of money because products need to leave China, for example. So prices are going to increase and capacity is going to diminish. So you need to focus in really planning your supply chain. You need to allow time so you don't pay huge amount of money for transportation and logistics. And the last trend that I would like everyone to do and follow is to use a freight forwarder, okay? So we know what's going on in the market hour by hour. And if someone can come up with a solution to your logistics problems, is a freight forwarder in Brazil, in Canada, in the world. We work with the partners, like Shannon said, with steamship lines in bulk, in larger quantities. We can give you the discount. When you work with a steamship line directly, and I know Brazilians are very famous for it, I deal with that every day. What happened in COVID was that those containers that were controlled by the steamship line doing a delivery for you, the factory was closed. Guess what? Those steamship lines did not offer you a warehouse to offload your product, a yard to take your container, and you paid the merge and storage. If you were working with a freight forwarder, there is many resources to offload your container, return the empty to the steamship line, schedule delivery with your customer. I mean, there's so much flexibility when you involve a freight forwarder. So I encourage you to think about that on your next supply chain move.
Guys,
Those
can
are
I
my
just
tips.
I want to jump in one thing too. I just want to give a compliment to Shannon. Shannon is 100% right about being in Brazil all the time. Over the years that I've known her, she's there more often than I am, and I'm a Brazilian resident. So I'm kind of shocked at just how much she is willing to be a partner for Brazilians. And so when she says she's a facilitator, she's absolutely right. You go with her with a plan, you go to her with a problem, she's going to give you some suggestions. She's really going to take you seriously. So I know that wasn't part of the questions things, but I want you to know there's a reason why we're supporting the port. And it's largely because of the advantages of using this port, but I got to tell you, the salesperson they have in Shannon is above all just a fantastic asset. So hats off to you, Shannon.
Yes.
I'm blushing.
I echo.
Thank you.
I echo that.
And actually,
Okay.
before COVID, I was ready to hop on a plane. It was actually the day before which everything shut down. So I was on my way to be in Sao Paulo and Melo. So yeah, I'm really missing it for sure. But at least we have this great way of connecting virtually.
Okay, so we are being pressured by the time, and I would like just to close in with the Port St. John. It's been interesting, Shannon, to see all the improvements since the last time I visited the port, and I was there with you. There's a lot that has been done, and as I can see, there's a lot to be developed in the next few years. So it's great to see the board growing in structure to cope with the development of the Brazil-Canada relations. So I'd like to offer you some space to share your final words with us today, and just reinforcing that all the speakers will be available through digital means to get in contact with you all and follow up the discussions we started today. So before we go into our final closing together with Carolina, I would like you to please share your final words with us, Shannon.
For us, growth is all about competitive options. And that's what we're trying to really focus on as far as our growth at the Port of St. John. And it's not just competitiveness within our service connectivities, within our shipping lines, but it's also competitiveness with the inland transportation providers. It's the competitiveness in looking at diversity and offering those value-added services that are coming from those that are looking to import or export through the Port of St. John. It's competitiveness in looking at the entire supply chain. And I'm happy to report that throughout the process, and especially with the Montreal strike, where like Peter and Arnon were talking about, we were inundated with volumes that we have never seen before. And it was an eye-opener for us to allow us to see what we need to do to get to that next level. So our infrastructure is being taken care of, but now we're putting in other processes and procedures to allow us to have that growth potential moving forward. Because with 250% growth year over year, we're going to hit those milestones pretty darn quick. So it was a great opportunity for us to work with our supply chain partners in building and fostering those relationships to ensure a more seamless operation.
Well, thank you, Carolina.
So I just wanted to, again, thank you CCBC for the partnership in putting this event together with Port St. John, as well as MELLOHAWK Logistics and Sidera Consulting for being here today and giving us so much insight on Brazil-Canada trade opportunities. In a year that has been very challenging for everyone, we remain committed in like bringing Brazil and Canada closer together through online. I think both chambers are very fast in offering online events and online opportunities for our members. And we're very optimistic for 2021. We look forward to having a great year, as well as a year of full of other events in partnership with CCBC. Hopefully, this is just the beginning of a long haul. And I wish you all a very happy and merry holiday season. And I hope that you all get some deserved rest to start 2021 fresh and ready for what is coming. So I just wanted to, again, thank you everyone and wish you all a great break, and hope to see you all and connect with all of you in the beginning of 2021. And thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Peter and Arnon, for our ongoing partnership throughout many years. And we look forward to continue promoting Port St. John, MELLOHAWK, and the Brazil-Canada trade relations. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Just a quick comment following up Carolina's message. I think it's quite symbolic to end up this year with an event organized by the two chambers, bridging Brazil and Canada, and having a port. So it's really connecting the two countries through St. John and through all the logistics involved. So I think this really represents what we are all doing here. And
did we lose Paulo?
I think so.
I think we did lose Paulo, but I will echo his sentiments entirely. With our new CEO, Carolina, and with Paulo and the CCBC, BCCC partnership, we are really excited about the way we've been able to move forward with all this. And
100%.
Nikhita and Ricardo, thank you so much for your lovely presentations. And Clayton, Claudia, and Andresa, muito obrigado por tudo. So I think that's everything, right, Carolina?
I think so. I just wish you all a very successful and fruitful 2021 and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
all
you
the
very
best.
much.
Happy
Good to see
holidays.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
watching.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.